Excuse me. So take a moment to adjust yourself so that you can settle into your seat. Close your eyes. And take a moment to tune into and acknowledge all of the forces that have come together to allow us to be present here with the teachings, with each other, and with ourselves. Not that we are ever not with ourselves, but with ourselves with more awareness. Let your body settle more fully into your seat. And take a deliberate breath or two to allow the exhale to release any unnecessary and accumulated tension. Let the inhale draw you deeper into your embodiment, into your form, into your unique set of characteristics and experiences. And then let the exhale connect you to the collective source. The source from which all arises or emanates and into which all dissolves or is reabsorbed or returns. Use the next breath or two to feel into the center of you, into the heart of your being. Recognize that place as the place of connection to the matrix, to the web that holds us all. Recognize that place as the seat of wisdom, of authentic power and voice. And then with the intention to listen from that space and to speak from that space, join your hands together in front of that area. And we'll initiate our time with one Om. Take a full breath. Bow your head over for a moment to your heart. And then release your hands. Lift your head and gently open your eyes. So I'm just going to again read the passage and highlight the last couple of lines that we're going to spend our time with tonight. So this is a passage from the non-dual text from the Christian tradition called The Thunder Perfect Mind. And I encountered this excerpt through a work of fiction by Sue Monk Kidd called The Book of Longings. So it says, first and the last. I am she who is honored and she who is. I am the whore and the holy woman. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the mother and the daughter. I am she. Do not be afraid of my power. I am of my name. I am the name of the sound and the sound of the name. Tonight we're going to look at the last lines. Do not be afraid of my power. I am the knowledge of my name. I am the name of the sound and the sound of the name. So for those of you that have been contemplating this for the last 2 weeks, I'd love to hear your thoughts about any of those lines. We don't have to go in order, or we can, as you like, but what has come up for you in your contemplation and interaction with these lines? I'm going to unmute you. Okay, Virginie, good.
I'd like to talk about the last 2 lines, and I will start by using at the end and then make my way back. And it seems to me that I am the name of the sound and the sound of the name, and I am the knowledge of my name, is actually can be seen actually as the complete acts of the Nataraja that we discussed before. Because in the notion of I am the name of the sound, you have the sound becoming through the naming of it. So you have the creative process, the maintenance, and the dissolution. And then in the second half of the verse, I am the sound of the name. The name is form, it is restricted, it is limited, and the sound of that name is then the occlusion or the hiding of what is at the root. And what is at the root is the knowledge of my name. And the knowledge of my name is the logos, is the harmonic pulsation that makes the universe comes to be. So in those two lines, you have the 5 acts of Nataraja, which we discussed previously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nodding.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense to me, because what I had, what stood out for me about those 2, that last line was something you had talked about one day. One day you were talking about the silence and how the silence is the source of all sound, but then all sound then falls back into silence, like in that once a sound is complete, it falls back into the silence. And it's that same thing we were doing. Were we doing it in one of? I guess we were doing it in yoga one day last week, right? We're breathing and then getting to the point, and then fall into the inhale, pause, and let it fall into the exhale, and it's that same. Which again is that circle, that all those phases of life, and I guess the name of the sound and the sound of the name. It also makes me think just of the Om, like how the Om is. The first time I heard the Om explained, it was the sound of the vibration of the earth, and it's sort of the first and the last sound that ever is, and it's almost like the name, the first name we have before there are any names, right? Because it's just the sound of the earth.
Yeah, and possibly I'll just broaden that to say the universe. That Om is the sound that is continually vibrating in the world since conception and is eternal and omnipresent. Yeah.
Yeah. And then our own heartbeat is then the next level of that, the internal level of that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I want to say some things about that because, yeah, these last lines are really very potent, and I find them like very mysterious and yet very like clear, and yet somehow hard to articulate the clarity. Even though I feel it very strongly and it's resonant, there's still areas that makes it sometimes a little hard to articulate. I speak about that, so I want to come back to the Om part and what you said, Kathy, about the silence and the sound arising from the silence and then dissolving into it. But Virginie, I have a question about what you were saying. Because you said that you thought that the revelation part or the illumination of grace was in the knowledge of my name, right? Is that what I understood?
Yeah. That's what I because in the knowledge of the name, it is the most subtle knowledge. It is not the gross level of knowledge that the individual has. It is at this most supreme, form of knowledge, which in Tantra would be Vak or Vaj. And I think at that most subtle form of the word, you are at the creative pattern of the universe. So a bit like Om, if you want, except in the Christian liturgy it would be B, and it came into B.
Right, so you're saying, you say, I am the knowledge of my name, you're meaning like our essential name, the name that is sort of hidden in our depths, so to speak. As opposed to like...
I am the knowledge of the Logos.
Right.
Logos meaning what again, Virginie?
Meaning the word.
Okay. Yes, because actually what came up for me before when you were talking was that there, whichever gospel in the New Testament starts that it was
the word was
the word. The word was God. There, it started like the first thing was a word, and the word was God, and then
it's in John. Yeah,
and
that would be, in my opinion, the knowledge. Being aware of the knowledge of your name is to be aware of the knowledge of the Logos, and the Logos is the most subtle form of the word. It's the creative, harmonic power of the universe.
Right. So I am the knowledge of the divinity, right? Like I am my name is I, in that kind of most transcendental I, the I that is everything, the I that is a tree, that says I am a tree. If we were like personifying a tree, and I am human, and I am like all of the objects in the world, the I that links them all together. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right. That's interesting. I was taking that line to be, I kind of did almost the inverse of what you were saying when I was contemplating the verses, where I was like, I am the knowledge of my name, a little more concrete, where, I am the collective experiences of my individuality that's held together by my name. And I am the family and culture and race that is held by my name. And then I am a human, also part of my name. That's my category of beingness. And then underneath all of that, there is the I am, but the other layers of the name the knowledge that I have of my name, I was thinking more of the concealment level, like that I am my name, and that's both on the sort of most superficial, most mysterious, the most intimate level as well, and that and then it's the I am the sound of the name, I am the name of the sound, and the sound of the name. I was thinking more it was the sound of the name that was referencing that illumination of like I am just vibration that is internally vibrating and held together by this mysterious vibratory force that we could call Om, or we could call I am, or we could call Be, or and that was the kind of level of grace in the, if we're using the still the image of the Shiva Nataraja.
Okay. I read it the other way around because of the sentence construction as well, because it says I am the name of the sound and the sound of the name. So because of the preposition here, I equated it with the first four acts of Shiva. So that was my logic. The fact that when the sound of the name means that it is being channeled into a word, the sound is being channeled into a word that is the name of that sound, and that hides all other possibilities.
Mm-hmm. So my counter to that would be, and you guys can also please jump in with your thoughts, but it says, I am the knowledge of my name. So my name is Mona. Whereas it says, I am the name of the sound and the sound of the name. So the name is one goddess, God, source, creator, that's the largest, because the sound of the name, which is the universe, as opposed to the knowledge of my name, which is personal.
Yeah, you could see it that way. I totally can see why you would say that, but that would conflict with the first line that says, I am the first and the last. And if I'm the first and the last, then I am creation.
But that's actually, you're sort of proving my point, because the first line is, I am the first and the last. So I am the name of the sound and the sound of the name.
By the knowledge of my name, we can argue the possessive pronoun indefinitely.
Right.
The fact that the poetess used knowledge of my name, it does refer back to being the first and the last. And that would mean the supreme name. So I am the knowledge of my supreme name.
Which doesn't, I'm sort of seeing like but what you're both saying, and I would almost say that your two arguments prove that I am the first and the last, and if my later on that is saying, well, if we're talking about me, my name, Kathy, Mona, Virginie, Tina, that I also encompass the great I, the she, like I am she, right? And that, so the author, whoever the author is, the voice that is speaking, as I am first and the last, and I am all the things, and I am she. But then if it's becoming personal, does that not then insinuate that I, little I, is also big I? You know what I mean? Like that we're an embodiment of the greater I.
Yes.
I totally think so.
Yes.
So in that sense, you're both right.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think so too, right? This I is the universal I, for sure. Mm-hmm. And universal I. Tina, just want to give you an opportunity to share if you'd like. I think you're muted right now. Oh, you're muted, so just hold on.
I would just say, yeah, what was I saying? That, yes, if we refer to the poet or poetess, could be a poet, that person is very smart to write it in a way that can be ambiguous and interpreted both ways, because as Kathy said, like it just goes to prove the point. So the more interpretation there is, it just proves the point of non-duality.
Right, exactly. If we see it in the various ways, so see the ways that they do ultimately kind of come together, right? That we can hold these various vantage points and together, we are closer to the truth than when we stick on our own one limited perspective. Right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I want to say a little bit more about the last line, and I don't know that this is going to relate as much to that earlier part of the conversation, but I'll draw it in. But Kathy, did you hear any more about your thoughts and contemplations
About the last line?
Or any of the lines? Any of the lines? Well,
the big line that stood out for me in all of that was I am the knowledge of my name, because reading it last week, the first thing that popped into my head was George Floyd and the fact that he called out for mom. Mm-hmm. And women all around the world heard that, and women all around the world said, he's calling all the mamas, and he's calling the mother. And also being involved in the process of reading the rose and participating a bit in rosary circles with different people from all over North America, because it's online, of course. Listening to people saying the same prayers, Hail Mary, that people use all the names of, and people, Divine Mother, when praying these sort of standard prayers, and that it doesn't matter which name you use, that the mother's going to hear her name, whether you call her Mary or Mother or Inanna or Isis or Goddess or any of them, Durga, any of those names. They're all part and parcel of the same thing. And so that I am the knowledge of my name, that no matter what name you call, I'm going to hear. So again, talking about the bigger she, that it doesn't matter, that as soon as I am the knowledge of my name, so as soon as you form that vibration, I guess I don't know if you said it explicitly or implicitly, like that idea how a word has energy and a word has vibration, and as soon as you put voice to and shape to a certain sound, then it takes on a certain amount of energy and it has a certain power, and then that vibration carries the energy and the power of that name. And so that there's a recognition in that vibration, like they say in the law of attraction, right? The law of attraction is not that you think the thought, but it's that you feel the feelings, and it's the feeling that you have that sends out the vibrations. And the same thing with words. And words have power, like depending on when people use words. I do that with clients all the time. They just, you describe something that's happening to you, and you must have seen this doing psychology as well, Mona, like when people use a certain word over and over again, there's an energy to that word. If they use one description over another to say pretty much the same thing, but there's a power. Anyway, a lot of rambling thoughts, but they started from that whole idea of just, and it was so powerful last week with after that whole George Floyd thing, just the mama, and how it just galvanized mamas everywhere.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful link, actually. And it connects me a little bit to the line that we didn't talk about much so far, which is do not be afraid of my power, because you're talking about the power of the word, and the word that is the name, and the word that is the name of the sound, and the sound that is in the names, and that's the power that we're here perhaps being suggested to not be afraid of. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are also 3 little dots there, so there's a part missing in the middle, right? Like there's there's a
yes. I mean, it's actually quite a long text. It's a very long poem, and there is a section there, but it still is carrying the same thread through. So there's a relationship there. I was also contemplating, which ties into what you were saying. There was a story going around when I was early in my yoga days, and it was talking about Mr. Iyengar had the reputation of being quite fierce especially in his physical adjustments of students, and teachers would share their experience of those physical adjustments, and there was a recognition on Mr. Iyengar's part that then came through in the stories that if there was an adjustment given and the student responded like with or ow or eh, that was a sound that was to be not articulated, because it wasn't a true sound. It was just the mind going, oh, I don't like that, or that's not comfortable. There were the other sounds that we as students might experience sometimes when there's an adjustment, or in other moments of our life, that are much more of a primal or primordial sound, where it's like or there's some sound of release that is a much deeper, and not that like I don't like that, kind of more, it has a different vocal quality, and that those more primal or primordial sounds are the call to the divine. Like primal sounds link us to that vibration in the world that perhaps are maybe more intimately linked to Om, of which Mama is kind of that sound, right? Like when we're really bringing it out of our depths in a moment of anguish and a moment of pain, and that then it is the sound of the name, right? It is the name in this sound, and it carries a knowledge that we all respond to and intimately and instinctually understand.
Yeah.
I was also, one last piece, I was also in these last lines recognizing and you were saying it in terms of the power of speech, Kathy, and I was also articulating it as the sacredness of speech, like the something that I don't always tap into is the power of the words and how I can use them as a as an articulation of that which is sacred, and I can use them thoughtlessly, which interferes with their power. And we use so many words, and that's back to the silence part, right? We use so many words and we don't use silence, and how they link together is part of the sacred dance maybe of Nataraja around which words we choose, how many words we use, at times when we're silent, at times when we need to speak, at times when we're speaking and we need to be silent. And that interplay really is a recognition, I think, of the use of our power, the power of the word that has then trickled into all these words that we get to use, and the behind the sounds that I express without thought.
Yeah. And it's like when we use words thoughtlessly or all the time, that they lose their power, as he's saying. Like the word that comes to mind for me when you say that is awesome, right? Like everybody's like, oh, it's so awesome. It's so awesome. And it's like, awe is huge. So that every once in a while I want to use, like, I have been in awe of something. We were in Scotland and seeing the mountains up in the Highlands, and they were awesome. Like, it was an experience of, oh my God, God lives. Like, oh my God, God lives here. Yes. So there we go. Using God, not very thoughtfully. But that's it. It's like, they were awesome, but I couldn't, trying to describe that to people. I felt stupid using the word awesome because it just had no power anymore.
Yeah, and
so like everything else that we've drained the life out of our words, as well as out of our food or health or everything.
Well, and possibly in an interesting way, we've really reduced power of sacred words, right? Like, we no longer have a that recognizes or represents the sacred and the universal. Like, we go around and they're often misinterpreted, and we just don't have the language. And awesome is one of the words that was related, at least most of its history, in that sacred language that we no longer have as part of our communication. Nala expressing her language.
So it seems that we're all afraid of the power because we can't seem to talk directly about that line.
So I was also relating this back to the conversation on the Shiva Nataraj around the concealment and the that Marianne Williamson quote from when she finished the Course in Miracles, where she says something to the effect of, we are not afraid of our inadequacy. It is our power and our light that is what we fear most. And so this line was referencing that for me, that it's like, I am much less comfortable with my largesse or my voicedness or my sound. And I am much more comfortable with my limitations and the constraints that I have wrapped myself in, either personally or as a result of family and so on. And so it's that line resonates for me in that respect, and links back to our earlier conversations.
Mm-hmm. Happier in the comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
I think do not be afraid of my power implies the creative power that the goddess, has in the universe, and it's a benevolent power. She's trying to say that it's a benevolent power where she creates positive objects or images that are not to be feared. That creation in itself is benevolent, and therefore does not need to be feared. And there lies her power.
Although, if we're looking at the first part, and it doesn't say specifically, but that if we're still talking about the creation cycle, it necessarily involves destruction at a certain point, and that if we're looking at those all those different binaries, if there's going to be creation, there's going to be destruction. If there's going to be goodness and kindness, there's going to be fierceness and violence and all that opposite, right? You have peaceful goddesses like Lakshmi, who's like abundant and loving and open and generous, and then you've got Kelly, who's like, woo, I'm gonna like slice everybody's head off. So I think when I think of power again, bring it back to a personal level, that's it. Like when I get to those moments of like feeling expansive and powerful, it's like, okay, this is great when I feel good, but what's going to happen on the day that I'm angry? I'm going to rip everybody's head off. And we have those days where we're so angry that we could rip somebody's head off. And so but that is part of our power as well. And again, it's part of those two sides, but that's the part we're afraid of. Although, to be honest, I also get afraid when I'm too much on the positive, just so much energy. Feeling like a force of nature, which we are.
But I think if we the parallel between Tantra and this text, Tantra would say that the ultimate level of the divinity, it's all okay, whether you create good or bad, or fierce or benevolent, or because it is just an expression of creation done out of complete freedom.
Yeah, and I guess it's the ego, it's the small mind and the societal training that has made us afraid of that kind of power, when whether it's, we've all been trained to be nice and polite and kind and that stuff, but also centuries of, if you just even think of women or whatever demographic you're going to use to people who have been put upon and marginalized, etc., then we were burned and whipped and drowned for being powerful and outspoken and all the things. So that's been bred into us to fear that.
Well, and to fear the freedom, right?
And to fear the freedom.
To fear what it is to not have those constraints.
Because we like to have our structure. We need a structure in which to be free, right? There's that, what is it, that story of is it a bug or a fish or something that you put them in a container for a while and they learn the container, and then you take the container away and you don't know, I can't remember what animal it is that you do that with, but that idea that we get used to our cages, our boxes, and then we don't necessarily know how to go beyond that.
And it's like certainly the fish that only grows, like the goldfish only grows to the size of the container, right? Like because it's limited by its environment. So if you put it in a small bowl, it will stay small, but if you put it in a pond, it'll grow much bigger. And so it's limited by its environment, which of course makes sense on a biological level, except, when we take it on a more spiritual level, the way that the perceived environment limits our size, right? The way we give ourselves space.
That's what... Oh, sorry. I was going to say, well, maybe that's what this poem is saying, like that. Don't worry about your perceived limitations. That it's all, as Virginie says, it's all good demands that to be both, to be all of it. Yeah. Therefore, do not be afraid.
Yeah, and that the perceived limitation of this body doesn't actually limit our selfness, which exists before this body and will exist after this body. I wanted to also link in the last little bit that we were saying around Virginie, you were using the power of creation, and the ultimate power of creation is the vibration from the tantric tradition. The ultimate power of creation begins with the vibration that turns into light and sound, and then the sound turns into phonemes, and those are put together into words, and then the words turn into language. And so when you were like, don't be afraid of the power of creation, like don't be afraid of that primordial vibration that is the names and the sounds of the names and the knowledge of the name, and to really tune into the vibration. And so many of especially the tantric practices, mantra as a way to connect to that essence, to our divinity, to the sound of the name of the sound, and the knowledge of the name and the power held in that. So when we do mantra repetition, we're sounding the name in various aspects and tuning into the vibrational power of creation held in the sound. So our practice tonight, which is going to be a little short, going to involve the repetition of the primordial sound, the eternal sound, which is the sound that has never been created and will never dissolve, and is the sound of the universe. And so In this tradition, repeating the sound Om is done on the exhale, and with this process, so the idea is that you imagine the breath in coming from the crown of the head down into the pelvis, and the sound beginning in the pelvis and traveling up through the torso, the sort of O or U sound traveling up through the torso. And then when it reaches the nasal passage, it turns to a nasal sound. So it's not M that's put out through the lips, it's and a nasal sound that goes upward as opposed to outward. And that way of repeating Om tunes us into the essential vibration is the power of the universe, and from which all sounds and arise. So we can try that for a few rounds, and then the sound, it's articulated out loud to begin with, and then can be also felt in silence after a period of time. Does that explanation make sense? So inhale down, and then and then somewhere around here it just turns into silence, and it goes, the exhale continues up into the ether, and then the inhale is brought down to the pelvis, and then the exhale rises up from there. Okay?
Cool.
So the biggest thing is that you want to concentrate M sound and turn it kind of more into an NG sound, or a French nasal N sound, and send it up as opposed to out. Okay? So I'll do like maybe about 4 rounds of this, and then we'll sit in the vibration that follows it. So you can, I'm going to mute you for those of you on Zoom. You can adjust your seat. This is a practice where the torso, you want to have it elevated and straight, a straight spine, so that you can really allow the movement to go upward. The movement of the sound Om. And this, we're going to do it for 4 repetitions or 5 in subsequent exhales. So the inhale is passive, and then the exhale rises. So of course I'll say it with my breath, but you do it with your own breath, and you don't want to strain to make the breath, the exhale, longer. Sound will help it to lengthen somewhat. So sitting well, close your eyes. And completely relax the face, but especially the jaw. With the jaw relaxed, torso that runs from the base of the pelvis to the crown of the head and extends about a foot above the crown of the head. As you feel into or imagine that central column, soften the crown of the head. And then imagine the breath moving up and down along that central column. So just a few moments here, feeling the inhale descend from above the crown of the head, move down the central column of the torso to the base of the pelvis. Feel the exhale rise from the base of the pelvis along the central column of the torso and up and out through the crown of the head. Before we make the sound Om, feel into the next exhale and recognize that the sound, the sort of ah sound of the Om, will begin at the base of the pelvis up to around the heart, where the sound will turn into the O or U sound. And then it will continue, and in the mouth and nasal cavity it will turn into the nasal M sound, and continue as a sound until about the level of the eyebrows, and from there it will move silently up and out, crown of the head and beyond. And then we'll draw the next inhale down from there. So we'll begin with the next exhalation. Inhale, bring the breath down to the base of the pelvis. Inhale. Exhale to begin. Three more. After your fifth round, feel into the continual reverberation of the sound inside and maybe also around you. the silence, hear the sound Om, its eternal, constant reverberation in the silence that holds all sounds. Without losing the connection to the barely perceptible ongoing vibration of Om, the sacred sound, your breath. And with your next exhalation, join your hands together at your heart. And bowing your head over to your heart, pause there for a moment. And then release your hands, your head. Gently open your eyes. Thank you.